We are less than 2 weeks from the new year, but all eyes are on 2020, especially for the Democratic presidential contenders. 7 contenders took to the stage in the final debate of 2019 last night in Los Angeles. They all spoke on their health care, climate change, economic plans, but they also went after each other.
Here are some of the key moments that you may have missed.
If the president claims that he is so innocent, then why doesn't he have all the president's men testify?
The court that counts here is the court of public opinion. The American people deserve to see the truth.
Stop being obsessed over impeachment, which unfortunately strikes many Americans like a ball game where you know what the score is going to be, and start actually digging in and solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place.
How do you answer top economists who say taxes of this magnitude would stifle growth and investment?
Oh, they're just wrong.
Senator, with all respect, this question is about race. Can you answer the question as it was asked?
People of color, in fact, are going to be the people suffering most if we do not deal with climate change.
No, I'm not willing to commit one way or another. Here's the deal. I'm not even elected one term yet, and let's see where we are. Let's see what happens.
Senator Warren, you would be the oldest president ever inaugurated. I'd like you to weigh in as well.
I'd also be the youngest woman ever inaugurated.
We have to stop confusing economic value and human value. We have to be able to say to our kids and Kyle that you have intrinsic value because you're an American and you're a human being.
Billionaires in wine caves should not pick the next president of the United States.
Senator, your net worth is 100 times mine.
Get used to it. This is a nation of immigrants. That's who we are. That's why we're who we are. That's what makes us different.
If you want to talk about the capacity to win, try putting together a coalition to bring you back to office with 80% of the vote as a gay dude in Mike Pence's Indiana.
Trump thinks mistakenly that he is going to win re-election by dividing us up. We are going to win this election by bringing our people together, Black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American. That's what America must be about.
All right, so let us bring in Leslie Sanchez and Antjuan Seawright. Leslie is a CBS News political contributor and Republican strategist, and Antjuan is a CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm going to start with you. Yeah. Fewer people on stage. I personally liked it so much better because we could hear a little bit more from the candidates, and I thought we got to see different aspects of their personality that we never got to see before. Who do you think made the most out of having that extra time on stage?
Oh, I think the front runner, Joe Biden, demonstrated why he is the front runner and why he continues to get better as time goes on. I also thought Andrew Yang had a hell of a night. Believe it or not, he's very charismatic and he's very funny, but he made some very valid points. And I think that when you think about what's important to everyday people, he connected the dots tremendously. I think as this race starts to be more defined, people are looking for how can they transition to a better quality of life. They're looking for maturity and stability from whoever our nominee will be. And I think Biden demonstrated that last night more so than anyone else on the stage.
You know what I thought about Yang is like part of his style is to give you a point and then give you the data to back it up. And that doesn't lend itself when you have like 10 seconds, but because he had more time, he could really like sort of hit you with the facts, you know?
And credit to the moderators. This was a different style of debate. And so that brought forth different types of questions. And I think that was a point that flushed out some answers from candidates otherwise we have not heard before. And I credit PBS and Politico for having some tremendous moderators and some great questions.
A number of issues came up during the debate, including health care. And polling, as you guys know, shows that it's a leading issue for Democratic voters in 2020. Joe Biden went after the cost of Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All proposal. Let's play a bit of that.
It costs $30 trillion. Let's get that straight. $30 trillion over 10 years. Some say it costs $20 trillion. Some say it costs $40. The idea that you're going to be able to save that person making $60,000 a year on Medicare for All is absolutely preposterous. 16% of the American public is on Medicare now, and everybody has a tax taken out of their paycheck now. Tell me, you're going to add 84% more, and there's not going to be higher taxes? At least before he was honest about it.
Oh, Joe.
It's going to increase personal taxes. They're going to be...
That's right. We are going to increase personal taxes.
Okay.
But we're eliminating premiums. We're eliminating co-payments. We're eliminating deductibles. We're eliminating all out-of-pocket expenses. And no family in America will spend more than $200 a year on prescription drugs.
So let's talk about this, Antjuan. How is Medicare for All, which is what that soundbite was going to talk about, how is that resonating, or perhaps not, with not just Democrats, but Leslie, weigh in on how just, in terms of the population of this country, when even if you're a Democrat or Republican, when you say Medicare for All, it means that the things that you are familiar with are perhaps going away. What are you hearing, Antjuan, first?
Well, for some of us, it's a Sunday school word, so it's a no-no. I think that I've made no apologies about what I think in terms of I think healthcare will not only define this next election in the primary, but it will define this general election for all of us. And that's why Democrats have to get it right. The American people have put their trust in us, as they demonstrated in 18 and as polls indicate in 20, about dealing with this massive issue called healthcare. So we have to get it right. The Affordable Care Act worked. It's not perfect. There's some things we can fine-tune to make it right, and I think we have to focus there. When you disrupt the system and throw it out, that's not good for anyone, and I think that's what people have demonstrated and what they want from a pragmatic approach to fixing healthcare.
It's interesting because Joe Biden was there for the Affordable Care Act, and he said we're seeing provisions being struck down by the courts. And it's interesting also, one thing that didn't get a lot of play is President Trump was talking about prescription drug coverage. Right in the middle of impeachment, he's like, we want to get prescription drugs handled. Medicare for All, agreeing with Antjuan, is the taboo in the sense that it's talking about the expenses are extremely high. You see the centrist Democrats, tethering the progressive left to that, the fact that it's not affordable. Elizabeth Warren is saying, oh, their numbers are wrong when you're talking about the trillions of dollars it would add in terms of cost, and that people would lose their existing doctors, and you really don't know what you're getting. So higher premiums, higher costs, losing your existing doctors, losing your employer-based health plan. Those are really high negatives, Republican or Democrat, because of how much instability and when you're talking about raising costs. So for even the president, like I said, to be talking about prescription drugs, for the courts to be addressing it, that's why it's a really difficult area. But one thing we know for sure, you don't want to be on the side of increasing the cost as opposed to increasing the coverage.
Leslie, let me ask you a question, because, the conversation has gone as we look towards 2020. What are Democratic voters, what are they interested in? What are their top issues? Healthcare always comes up. And then when it comes to Republican voters, it's always how do they feel about the president? We don't ask quite often what are their top issues.
Sure, top issues, economy. But economy is, especially for women voters, is very much connected to healthcare, because they're the ones, I want to go to the good doctor, not the bad one. They're the ones that are saying, maybe I'm not going to send my child, or I'm not going to go to the doctor because I don't want to pay that, the increased premiums or the out-of-pocket cost. These are realities and economic realities. So I do agree. Healthcare becomes that big thing, and as people have aging parents and children that are sick, they're really wondering where they're going to get that cross pressure and who's going to best be able to meet that. Andrew Yang is exactly right. It isn't this counter that we don't like the president, we're going to have impeachment. What is the alternative? And they've yet to present one that solidifies that base.
Is healthcare, is that a topic that resonates with Republican voters as much as it does with Democrats?
Like
because the president, but are they unhappy now, or are they satisfied with, for example, the president's legislation on prescription drugs?
I think it's a great question, right? Because Republicans ran on repeal and replace not that long ago. That could not happen. We couldn't get it done in Congress. So now the alternative, kind of like 2.0, we're actually at 3.0 in terms of that. So let's look at things. Pre-existing conditions, we all agree on that. It's almost like we're re-litigating all of this and re-debating all of these areas. How to keep premiums low, and how to ensure that small businesses have the opportunity to grow but not be so stifled by healthcare costs. That's a reality. And then regulation. So the president is addressing those economic costs, and I think it's piecemeal, Vlad. It's not going to be this big sweeping because of the instability. People don't trust the government to get it right, so they'd rather see it done incrementally in ways they can understand in phases.
Three things you have to know. One, healthcare will be even more important now because of the Fifth Circuit ruling as of yesterday. The fact of the matter is that's going to make this shiny object called healthcare even more. So the two things that keep popping up in Democrat and Republican polls about healthcare: one, prescription drugs. Congress, Democrats passed it a few days ago. The president has pledged to veto it. Number two, the second subsequent issues, accessibility and affordability. Those are the things that rural America and suburban America struggle with, and that is where Democrats have to get this thing right. And that's why going to this new idea of Medicare for all may not be politically sexy for us going into a very consequential election next year.
We got to talk about impeachment because they had to talk about impeachment, the candidates. I wonder, Antjuan, is this sort of a little bit of a double-edged sword for the candidates because they all kind of feel the same way about impeachment? So there's like nothing sort of exciting. But also, every time you talk about impeachment, you talk about the president. And I mean, he says that he's benefiting from this conversation. He's raising all kinds of money about it.
Well, you have to treat impeachment in the way Mike Tyson prepares to fight. You have to jab and go. You have to jab at it because it's important, but you have to go on. When you talk about impeachment, if I'm a presidential candidate, one, you talk about it from a national security standpoint. One, we have to have free and fair elections. We cannot allow foreign interference to come into our elections. Number two, you have to have a candidate at the top of the ticket that will help uplift the bottom of the ticket so you can have a Democratic-controlled House and Senate so we can hold leaders accountable, whatever that looks like. But number three, you have to be able to focus on the failures of the president, regardless of whether he's impeached or not. And I think that's how you address it. But you have to go on. So you jab and go on to what matters, what keep people up at night, and what makes them nervous during the day because they have not answered the questions from last night.
Let me ask you, Leslie, is Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, someone that Republicans see as a formidable candidate should he continue to rise in the polls? In that, just like President Trump, he had no real government experience. I mean, he was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, but compared to the others on that stage yesterday, he has the least amount of experience. So he's not swampy. He does have military experience, was President Trump. You know, that's what when President Trump says he went to drain the swamp, you could say to somebody that he has not been in the swamp, right? But he does have military experience, which the President of the United States does not have. He is a centrist, whereas you're talking about folks like Senator Warren and Senator Sanders who are not considered centrist. And he's young when you talk about folks like former Vice President Joe Biden. So I wonder if he presents a particular challenge to Republicans, to the president and his campaign, that perhaps the others don't.
No, I think he's like Beto O'Rourke 2.0. It's this kind of distraction at the moment. Really interesting candidate to look at, but not the substance that you saw on that stage. It's going to be really difficult, while they may be popular in that sense, to beat a Joe Biden in terms of the depth, the substance, and what that contrast looks like. But could he go against President Trump? Because President Trump came to the office with not a lot of substance in the way that we describe it when we talk about politics. Right. I would be more concerned about Amy Klobuchar more than the mayor Pete, only because he's still very young, doesn't have the depth, doesn't have the experience. Had he been a governor, had he been somebody who's kind of been in the trenches longer, there's tremendous appeal, but he's just not there yet. And especially you could see the depth of that last night on the debate stage.
All right. Cool. Very good. Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.